Welcome back to What America's Thinking. We're discussing tight races in battleground states ahead of the midterm elections. Here's a deep dive into Florida.
So a new University of North Florida's Public Opinion Research Lab poll finds Republican Governor Ron DeSantis and Republican Senator Marco Rubio, they hold double-digit leads over their Democratic opponents.
Joining us now to discuss is state capitol reporter for WFLA in Florida, Libbey Dean. Welcome, Libbey.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So thanks for being here. It looks like the Senate and governor's races, Republicans are running away with it. But for a minute there, it seemed like Democrats were going to perform a little bit better than they had in recent election cycles. What happened over the last few months?
I think there's been a lot of shifts over the last few months, but the first one and most obvious one is Roe v. Wade. I mean, back when it was overturned, you were seeing kind of that blue wave, so to speak. And then now, as we're seeing the issues shift and voters' concerns shift, we're seeing more of that red wave here in Florida. But the thing is, that has been kind of the case in the last few elections. We've been leaning more and more towards electing Republicans.
Yeah, in terms of the areas to watch in Florida, my hometown is Orlando, and I think we might be biased going back to 2000 when the I-4 corridor arguably decided that election. But what parts of the state should we be looking out for, maybe more swing parts of the state that could impact the outcome of the election?
I think there's different districts that could impact it in the southern part of Florida, but most right now I feel like are kind of in a lock in Republican, and we might see more of a supermajority in the Senate here in Florida.
So is there any district where that's actually competitive? I'm hearing a little bit, and that Tadeo might be putting up a fight against Congresswoman Salazar.
Yeah, Annette Tadeo, her district is one to watch, as well as Ana Paulina Luna's district. I am a reporter for the Tampa Bay area, so kind of those areas around there we've been focusing on. You know, Charlie Crist's old seat that he gave up to run against Governor DeSantis is also one to watch.
And speaking of Charlie Crist, you know, in that governor's race, it's interesting from a Washington perspective. We all look at someone like Ron DeSantis and say, he could be a potential heir apparent to the Republican 2024 presidential nomination, depending if President Trump runs. However, he has to get through his own reelection bid first. And we know that he has relatively high approval ratings. He's been leading in polling, but it seems like Charlie Crist has run a pretty good campaign. And there is some polling that shows he could be giving the governor a run for his money. Obviously, Charlie Crist has held this position he's a statewide name commodity in Florida. How do you view this race? I mean, is it closer than the polls might be suggesting?
As you said, you know, there's no 2024 run without the success of his 2022 run to be governor again. And that race, to me, I think the biggest thing has been, you know, we have Charlie Crist, who's ran for governor 3 times now, been governor as a Republican. And so the race necessarily, from what I'm seeing in polling, isn't tight. But one thing I do want to point out when I was reading through polls that I found was really interesting was, you know, Democrats have really pushed on the abortion, and this is why you should elect us, that topic. But when I was reading this most recent poll, you know, women were more likely to vote for DeSantis. It was like 49 to 46. So very close margins in the sense of demographics here. But I think it's interesting that the issue that Charlie Crist has really, really heavily campaigned on necessarily didn't translate in this poll or to the polls in general.
So another big demographic for Ron DeSantis, he's favored among most Hispanics surveyed in the recent Telemundo LX News poll, even by some Florida Democrats.
That's right. DeSantis is up by 7 points with Hispanic voters at 51% and 44% respectively, while 50% of Hispanic voters support the move of migrants to Martha's Vineyard, 52% for those born out of the U.S., 49% of those born in the U.S. Libbey, what can you tell us about this dynamic?
This is a dynamic we're seeing all across the country. We're seeing these Hispanic voters kind of shift, But I do think this is essential in not only Governor DeSantis' race, but also the race for Senate with Marco Rubio and Val Demings. But yes, this is certainly something that they need to get these voters out to the polls for them, because if not, it's going to be closer margins. I don't think it's necessarily going to make a huge difference in the sense of who is chosen, but it will be closer margins for sure when it comes to getting that demographic of voters out to the polls.
So talking to some folks in Florida, I've heard complaints from Republicans that maybe Marco Rubio's campaign is not as dynamic as Ron DeSantis's. Are you hearing a little bit of that? Is that contributing to Rubio's closer call with Demings?
I think definitely the Senate race is one to watch, but when you look nationwide, this isn't one that could change things dramatically. What I'm seeing with Rubio's campaign is, it's so interesting. We have our other Senator, Rick Scott, who, is in charge for the campaign finances going towards these certain races across the country. And then he has his own fellow senator from Florida who didn't get that much funding. And even Val Demings outraised him, but it was always that Marco Rubio had more on hand. I mean, he ran for president. He's had several campaigns and is well seasoned when it comes to campaigning.
And Libbey, when it comes to suburban voters and Val Demings, we know that Democrats and Republicans are both jockeying for those voters, but it seems like Val Demings is sort of a very good candidate for a lot of suburban women voters. Former law enforcement officer, she's been involved in the Orlando community for decades now. Do you think she has a leg up when it comes to that voting bloc?
Well, that's what's interesting is one thing that Rubio has really pushed is that Val Demings is anti law enforcement, this kind of thing, and she comes back and says, well, I am law enforcement, because she was police chief for over 2 decades. And I do think that necessarily when it comes to getting those suburban voters, she does have that appeal, and also being a woman is another thing to point out. But also, as I mentioned, when we started this shift from the abortion topic to now inflation, the economy hasn't necessarily boosted her when it comes to voter turnout.
So there's another interesting dynamic with Florida Latino voters. There are a lot of younger Cuban American, Colombian American, Venezuelan American voters went toward Hillary Clinton in 2016, and it looks like it's those younger voters who moved rightward in 2020 became Trump voters. You actually had Clinton-Trump voters. What dynamic are you seeing? Where are these younger voters that are so important for South Florida? Are they leaning toward DeSantis? Are they leaning toward Tadeo Jimenez? Where are they going?
That is one group of people that the Democrats really need to get out to the polls. That's the problem here for them, is the turnout. It's not necessarily not having support from these younger voters. It's more the turnout from these younger voters. And we've seen a lot of social media from all of these campaigns, and you've seen kind of that younger feedback. But yeah, I do think they're essential when it comes to those key races that you mentioned today, even Crist, and bigger races like Rubio and Demings.
Libbey, Florida's really become the center of the Republican ecosystem with Trump in South Florida, DeSantis in Tallahassee. What impact has the former president had on the state this campaign cycle? I mean, there's clearly tension between him and DeSantis, but we know that he's still an integral part of the campaign, ecosystem overall, not only in Florida, but across the country. Do you think he's played an impactful role?
Yeah, he obviously shocked that ecosystem when he chose to move to Mar-a-Lago after serving his presidency. But, he has played a huge role in this. But the thing is, DeSantis won, not necessarily he won, but a big push towards the end that led to DeSantis becoming governor back when he ran was he got that Trump endorsement. So now this dynamic of Trump versus DeSantis is very interesting. And even there was a development early this week. Trump announced that he would be rallying with Rubio in Miami on November 6th, just 2 days before elections. And, who's missing from that announcement? DeSantis.
So Florida's going to have, no matter what, no matter who wins every congressional race, you're going to have a new troop of congressional representatives. Some are, running in empty districts. Some are running in redrawn districts. Who are you looking at? You know these people from Tallahassee. Who are you looking at that's going to make a punch in D.C. next year?
I think when it comes to making a punch in DC, all of these legislators are going to pull a lot of weight, and we're seeing Florida kind of become the central. We're becoming integral when it comes to these culture war issues, and I think that is going to play out in the next coming legislative sessions.
Absolutely. Well, Libbey, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Julie and Raphael. I really appreciate it.
So thank you, Libbey, and thank you all for watching. And now we know a little bit more about what America's thinking, so we'll see you next time.